In a cramped childhood bedroom in suburban Ohio, a determined software engineer was about to risk everything her family held dear. What started as late-night coding sessions took a shocking turn when she came face-to-face with brutal family ridicule. Angeline Parker wasn't your typical Microsoft employee. For 3 years, she had spent her life building secure corporate systems, known for her methodical precision and cautious decision-making. When she announced her startup plans during a family video call, she had no idea she was walking into a battle for her family's respect. Angeline quit her 6-figure salary that would lead to transforming everyone around her. What began as desperate validation-seeking would become generational change. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Angeline Parker's fingers hovered over her keyboard, the resignation letter glowing on her monitor like a confession waiting to be made. Around her, the Microsoft campus hummed with its usual efficiency: engineers debugging code, product managers scheduling meetings, the comfortable rhythm of corporate life that had defined her existence for the past 3 years. She'd rewritten the letter 17 times. Each version felt inadequate, unable to capture the restless energy that had been building inside her chest for months. How do you explain to HR that you're leaving a 6-figure salary to chase an idea that existed mostly in your head, and a few thousand lines of code hidden in a personal GitHub repository? The AI algorithm she'd been developing in secret pulsed through her thoughts. Finance Flow, a personal finance app that could democratize investing for people who'd never thought Wall Street was for them. Every night after work, she'd disappear into her Seattle apartment, coding until her eyes burned, building something she believed could change lives. Something that mattered. Her manager's voice drifted over the cubicle wall, discussing quarterly projections with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned whether their work had meaning. Angeline had once felt that confidence. Before the algorithm started consuming her dreams. Before she realized that staying safe meant staying small. She clicked send before she could second-guess herself again. The rest of the day passed in a blur of exit interviews and awkward conversations with colleagues who couldn't understand why anyone would leave such a, quote, great opportunity. By 5:30, Angeline was carrying a cardboard box to her car, her Microsoft badge deactivated, her old life officially behind her. The drive home felt different. Every red light, every familiar street corner seemed charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. She'd jumped. There was no going back now. That evening, she positioned her laptop carefully on her kitchen counter, adjusting the angle to hide the stack of unpaid bills behind her. The weekly family video call was a tradition she'd maintained religiously since moving to Seattle, though lately these conversations felt more like performance art than genuine connection. Her parents' faces appeared on screen first. Robert Parker's weathered features showing the strain of another difficult month at the auto parts store. Linda's gentle smile masking the worry lines that had deepened over the past year. Jessica joined moments later from her Chicago high-rise, looking polished and professional even at 8 p.m. "How's work, honey?" Linda asked, the same question that started every call. Angeline's heart hammered against her ribs. "Actually, I have some news about that." Robert's expression sharpened immediately. He had a talent for sensing trouble before anyone spoke it aloud. "What kind of news?" "I quit Microsoft today." The words tumbled out before she could soften them. "I'm starting my own company. A financial technology startup called Finance Flow." The silence stretched across 3 time zones. Jessica's perfectly composed face went blank. Robert's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with the intensity he usually reserved for diagnosing engine problems. "You quit?" Robert's voice carried the edge it took on when discussing overdue invoices or disappointing sales figures. "Angeline, do you have any idea how many people would kill for your job?" "Dad, I know it sounds crazy, but I've been working on this app for months. It uses AI to help people invest small amounts." "AI?" Jessica interrupted, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Angeline, the fintech space is incredibly competitive. You're talking about going up against companies with billions in funding. Have you done any market research? Do you understand the regulatory landscape?" Angeline felt her carefully prepared explanations crumbling under their skepticism. I've been researching for over a year. There's a gap in the market for... There's a gap between your ears if you think this is a good idea, Robert snapped. I've watched 3 businesses on Main Street close this year because people thought they knew better than experience. You had security, Angeline. Benefits. A future. Linda's voice was gentler, but no less concerned. Sweetheart, maybe you could work on this as a side project? Keep your job and... I already quit. Angeline's voice cracked slightly. I submitted my resignation this morning. Jessica's head dropped into her hands. Oh my God, Angeline. Do you realize what you've done? In this economy? You can't just... This isn't some college experiment. This is your life. The disappointment in their faces cut deeper than she'd expected. These were the people who'd celebrated every good grade, every promotion, every safe milestone in her predictable career. Now they were looking at her like she'd announced plans to join a cult. I believe in this, Angeline said quietly. I think it can help people. Robert's laugh was bitter. Help people? You know what helps people? Steady income. Health insurance. A retirement plan. Not some fantasy about changing the world. The call ended 20 minutes later with stilted goodbyes and promises to talk soon that felt more like threats than comfort. Angeline closed her laptop and sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, surrounded by the detritus of her former life. Microsoft swag, performance awards, the comfortable accessories of conformity. Tomorrow she would drive back to Ohio. Back to her childhood bedroom, where she'd set up her real office and begin building something extraordinary. Tonight, though, she sat with the weight of their disappointment and the terrifying freedom of having nothing left to lose. The algorithm waited in her code, patient and full of potential. Soon she would teach it to change everything. Tyler Rodriguez's dusty Honda Civic pulled into the Parker family driveway, just as Robert was hauling another stack of unpaid invoices from his truck. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Tyler's infectious grin and paint-splattered jeans against Robert's grim expression and grease-stained work shirt. You must be the co-founder, Robert said, the title dripping with skepticism as he watched Tyler extract a guitar case and laptop bag from his back seat. That's me. Tyler Rodriguez, professional dreamer and occasional marketing genius. Tyler extended a hand that Robert shook with the enthusiasm of someone handling contaminated materials. Angeline appeared at the front door, her relief visible. 3 months of solitary coding had worn her thin. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair hung limp from too many 18-hour days in front of screens. But Tyler's arrival sparked something that had been dormant. Hope. Welcome to Finance Flow headquarters, she said, gesturing toward the modest 2-story house. Tyler's laugh was genuine, untainted by the family's pervasive doubt. Linda emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, studying Tyler with the careful assessment mothers reserved for their children's friends. You drove all the way from Austin? Yes, ma'am. Couldn't miss the chance to change the world from Ohio. Tyler's charm was effortless, but Linda's smile remained polite rather than warm. She'd heard too many grand promises lately. That evening, Tyler got his first taste of Parker family dynamics during dinner. Robert carved the pot roast with surgical precision, each slice accompanied by pointed observations about, quote, people who abandon good jobs for pipe dreams. Jessica joined by video call from Chicago, her presence filling the dining room with corporate authority, even through the laptop screen. So Tyler, Jessica's voice carried the measured tone she used for depositions. What's your exit strategy if this venture fails? Tyler didn't miss a beat. Same as yours if the law firm goes under. Figure out the next move and keep pushing forward. Robert's fork paused midway to his mouth. Law firms don't just go under. They're established. Stable. Tell that to the dozen firms that folded during the last recession, Tyler replied, his tone remaining cheerful despite the underlying steel. At least we're building something new instead of just maintaining something old. The silence that followed could have cut glass. Angeline watched her family process Tyler's casual dismissal of their safe, practical worldview. It was the first time anyone had challenged their certainty in months. Later, in Angeline's converted bedroom office, Tyler surveyed the impressive setup. 3 monitors displaying cascading code, whiteboards covered in algorithmic diagrams, empty energy drink cans forming a defensive perimeter around her desk. Jesus, Angie, this looks like NASA mission control. The AI learning model is more complex than I initially projected. She pulled up the code they'd been debugging for weeks, but it's starting to recognize spending patterns with 87% accuracy. Tyler studied the screens, his marketing background allowing him to see possibilities rather than problems. Show me the user interface. The demo was rough, functional but clinical. Users could connect bank accounts, set investment goals, and watch the AI suggest micro-investments based on spending habits. What Tyler saw was revolutionary. What any normal person would see was confusing. We need to make this feel like a game, he said finally. People don't want to think about algorithms. They want to feel smart about money. They worked until 3 a.m., Tyler sketching user experience flows, while Angeline coded new interface elements. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone with her vision. The next morning brought a harsh reminder of family priorities. Jessica's birthday party was scheduled for Saturday, a carefully planned celebration at an upscale Chicago restaurant. Angeline had promised to attend, but the algorithm was finally learning properly, and stopping now meant losing momentum. I can't leave, she told Linda over coffee. We're so close to a breakthrough. Linda's disappointment was quiet but profound. She's your sister, Angeline. She's also the one who thinks I'm destroying my life. The fight that followed was the worst they'd had since Angeline moved back home. Robert accused her of selfishness. Linda pleaded for family unity. Through it all, Tyler worked quietly upstairs, pretending not to hear the voices rising from the kitchen. When Jessica called that evening, hurt and angry about the missed party, Angeline was hunched over her keyboard, debugging code while Tyler sketched promotional ideas on the back of pizza boxes. You've changed, Jessica said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. This obsession isn't healthy. Angeline looked around her childhood bedroom, now a fortress of technology and ambition, and wondered if Jessica was right. The line between dedication and obsession had blurred somewhere between the first all-nighter and the 50th. But when she turned back to her screen and saw the algorithm successfully categorizing user transactions with 91% accuracy, she knew she couldn't stop. Not when they were this close to proving everyone wrong. The server crashed at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, taking Finance Flow's beta launch with it. Angeline stared at the error messages flooding her screen while Tyler paced behind her, running hands through his hair with increasing frequency. 53 users, he muttered. 53 people finally decide to trust us with their financial data, and we serve them a 404 error. Angeline's fingers flew across the keyboard, implementing emergency patches while her heart hammered against her ribs. This was their first real test. 50 beta users recruited through Tyler's network and carefully crafted social media campaigns. People who'd signed up because they believed in micro-investing, in democratizing wealth building for ordinary Americans. Database connection restored, she announced at 4:15 a.m. But we lost 6 hours of transaction data. Tyler stopped pacing. How bad is that? Bad enough that Mrs. Chen from Portland is going to wake up thinking we lost her savings account information. They spent the next 3 hours crafting apology emails, implementing redundancy systems, and questioning every decision that had led them to this moment. By sunrise, Finance Flow was stable again, but their confidence had taken a beating. The kitchen was unusually quiet when they stumbled downstairs for coffee. Linda stood at the stove, her movements precise but subdued. Robert sat at the table with ledgers spread before him, his own business troubles written in red ink across dozens of pages. Rough night? Linda asked, though the dark circles under their eyes answered her question. Technical difficulties, Angeline replied, not wanting to elaborate on their near disaster. Robert looked up from his ledgers with the grim satisfaction of someone whose predictions were proving accurate. That's the problem with technology. Too many moving parts. Too many ways to fail. Before Angeline could respond, a car door slammed in the driveway. Through the window, they watched a teenage girl extract multiple suitcases from an Uber. her movements sharp with barely controlled anger. "That's Chloe," Linda said, moving toward the front door. "Robert's brother's daughter. She's staying with us while her parents sort out their divorce." Chloe Parker burst through the front door like a force of nature. 17 years old, purple-streaked hair, and an expression that suggested the entire world had personally disappointed her. She surveyed the kitchen with the critical eye of someone accustomed to finding fault with adult decisions. "So you're the famous cousin who threw away a Microsoft job to play entrepreneur," she said, dropping her backpack on the table next to Robert's ledgers. "That's me," Angeline replied carefully. "And you're the one whose parents couldn't figure out how to stay married." Chloe's laugh was sharp but appreciative. "Touché. At least your failure is voluntary." Tyler introduced himself with characteristic enthusiasm, but Chloe remained unimpressed until Angeline mentioned finance flow. Then something shifted in the teenager's expression, professional interest replacing teenage cynicism. "Show me," Chloe demanded. Angeline hesitated. The app was still rough, held together with emergency patches and desperate hope. But something in Chloe's tone suggested this wasn't idle curiosity. 20 minutes later, they were crowded around Angeline's laptop in the makeshift office, while Chloe navigated finance flow with the fluid competence of a digital native. Her questions were pointed, practical, and occasionally brutal. "This interface is confusing," she said bluntly. "And your onboarding process assumes people understand investing terminology they've never heard." "We're working on simplifying," Tyler began. "Also, your social media presence is basically non-existent. You have, 300 followers on Instagram? My friend's cat has better engagement metrics." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Angeline felt her defensive walls rising. "We're focused on product development, not marketing gimmicks." Chloe's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to trash your app. The underlying concept is actually brilliant. Micro-investing for people who think investing is for rich people? That's solid. But you're marketing to Generation X when your real audience is people like me." She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Watch this." What followed was a masterclass in authentic content creation. Chloe filmed herself using finance flow, explaining concepts in language that felt natural rather than corporate. She highlighted features Angeline hadn't even considered selling points, turning complex algorithms into relatable stories about saving for concert tickets and college textbooks. "Post this on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter," she said, uploading the video. "And hire me as your social media manager. I work for equity, and the chance to prove my parents wrong about my screen addiction being worthless." Robert, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, snorted. Another dreamer joining the asylum. But Linda moved closer to the laptop, studying the video with the analytical mind she'd once applied to teaching high school mathematics. "This is good, Chloe. Clear. Accessible." That evening, during their weekly family video call, Chloe's presence changed the dynamic entirely. When Jessica launched into her usual lecture about financial responsibility, Chloe interrupted with questions about legal structures and compliance requirements that demonstrated she'd been researching finance flow extensively. "You understand regulatory frameworks better than most of my junior associates," Jessica admitted grudgingly. Robert remained skeptical, but his criticism lost some of its edge when confronted with Chloe's infectious certainty. Here was someone from his own family, someone whose parents were also struggling, who believed Angeline might actually be onto something. 2 days later, Chloe's video had generated 3,000 app downloads and 47 new beta users. More importantly, it had captured something Angeline hadn't been able to articulate: the emotional appeal of taking control of your financial future, $1 at a time. "We just made our first $500 in subscription revenue," Tyler announced, refreshing their dashboard for the dozenth time that morning. Angeline stared at the number on her screen. $500 wasn't life-changing money, but it represented something more significant: proof that strangers were willing to trust them with real money, real dreams, real financial futures. For the first time since leaving Microsoft, she allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed. Michael Thompson's email arrived on a Tuesday morning while Angeline was debugging user authentication protocols. The subject line was deceptively simple: coffee meeting, finance flow discussion. But the signature identified him as managing partner at Midwest Ventures. And Tyler's research revealed a portfolio that read like a greatest hits of successful startups. "He wants to meet next week," Angeline said, reading the message aloud. "In Palo Alto." Tyler looked up from his laptop, where Chloe's latest TikTok was generating comments faster than they could moderate them. "Michael Thompson wants to meet with us? The guy who turned a farming equipment startup into a billion-dollar agricultural tech company?" The preparation consumed the next 5 days. Tyler coached Angeline through pitch presentations, while she refined financial projections and user growth models. Chloe contributed a social media strategy that demonstrated their viral potential, complete with engagement analytics that impressed even Jessica during their weekly family call. "These numbers are actually quite impressive," Jessica admitted, studying the user acquisition metrics. "Though I still think you're moving too fast without proper legal foundations." Robert remained characteristically skeptical. California investors aren't going to care about Ohio problems. They live in a different world. But Linda had been quietly observing Angeline's transformation over the past weeks, the return of focus and energy that had been missing since college. "Maybe that's exactly what you need," she said. "A different perspective." The flight to San Francisco felt surreal. Angeline pressed her face to the airplane window, watching Ohio's familiar farmland give way to mountains, and eventually the sprawling tech ecosystem of the Bay Area. She'd visited Silicon Valley during college recruiting trips, but this felt different, less like tourism, more like pilgrimage. Michael Thompson's office in Palo Alto was deliberately understated. Exposed brick, reclaimed wood furniture, and the kind of calculated casualness that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But Thompson himself defied her expectations. Instead of the slick venture capitalist stereotype, she found a man in his 50s wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, his accent carrying traces of rural Kansas. "I grew up on a wheat farm outside Topeka," he said, without preamble. "Graduated from Kansas State, worked for John Deere for 8 years, before I figured out that technology could solve problems my grandfather never imagined." The pitch went better than Angeline had dared hope. Thompson asked pointed questions about user acquisition costs and retention rates, but he seemed more interested in the underlying philosophy than the financial projections. "Walk me through your typical user," he said. Angeline pulled up personas they'd developed based on their beta testing. "Sarah, 26, works retail management in Toledo, makes $38,000 a year, has $1,700 in savings, thinks investing is for people with money she'll never have. Finance Flow analyzes her spending, finds she could invest $12 a week in index funds if she optimized her coffee and streaming subscriptions. And she trusts your algorithm with her financial future? She trusts our algorithm because it speaks her language. No jargon, no minimum investments, no judgment about her financial choices. Just gentle guidance toward building wealth $1 at a time." Thompson leaned back in his chair, studying them with the intensity of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions. "You've identified a real market need. Your technology is solid. User engagement metrics are promising." He paused. "But I'm concerned about your leadership team." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Our technical skills complement each other well, and we've got strong market validation." "I'm not questioning your abilities," Thompson interrupted. "I'm questioning your motivations. Angeline, why did you really start this company?" The question hit like a physical blow. Angeline felt her carefully prepared responses crumbling under Thompson's direct gaze. "I wanted to democratize investing, help people who..." "That's your mission statement." "I'm asking about your personal motivation. What are you trying to prove? And to whom?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Around them, the office hummed with the quiet efficiency of successful venture capital, phones buzzing with deal flow, assistants scheduling meetings that would determine which startups lived or died. "I wanted to show my family that I could build something meaningful," Angeline said finally, "that taking risks could create something better than just playing it safe." Thompson nodded slowly. Family approval is a powerful motivator. It's also a dangerous foundation for a company. What happens when you succeed? What happens when you fail? Either outcome is complicated when your primary audience is people whose love you're trying to earn. After they left Thompson's office, Tyler and Angeline walked through downtown Palo Alto in stunned silence. The meeting had gone well, better than well, but Thompson's questions had exposed something Angeline wasn't ready to examine. That evening, in their hotel room overlooking the Stanford campus, she called home. The family video call felt different from this distance, literally and figuratively. Robert looked smaller somehow, his criticism carrying less weight when filtered through 3,000 miles and the afterglow of Silicon Valley optimism. "How did it go?" Linda asked. "He's interested," Angeline replied. "But he wants to meet again next month. He has some concerns about team dynamics." "What kind of concerns?" Jessica's lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. Angeline chose her words carefully. "He thinks I need to examine my motivations more honestly." Robert's expression hardened. "Some California hotshot thinks he knows you better than your family?" "Maybe he does," Angeline said quietly, surprising herself with the admission. "Maybe I don't know myself as well as I thought." The call ended on that uncomfortable note, leaving Angeline alone with questions she'd been avoiding for months. Was she building finance flow to help people, or to prove she was worthy of love? Did it matter, as long as the result was the same? Outside her hotel window, Silicon Valley glittered with the promise of technological solutions to human problems. But some problems, she was beginning to realize, couldn't be solved with code. Angeline found Robert in the auto parts store at 6 a.m., surrounded by inventory sheets that told the story of a business slowly bleeding to death. He looked up as the door chimed, his face showing the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. "We need to talk," she said, though her planned speech evaporated when she saw the stack of overdue notices on his desk. "If you're here to tell me about more investor meetings, I'm not in the mood." Robert's voice carried a weariness she'd never heard before. "We're 3 months behind on rent. The distributor is demanding payment up front. And yesterday, I had to lay off Tommy Martinez. Kid's got 2 babies at home." Angeline sat heavily in the plastic chair across from his desk, the same seat where she'd done homework after school 20 years ago. Back then, the store had bustled with activity, mechanics seeking parts, neighbors stopping by for advice, the comfortable rhythm of a business that mattered to its community. "How bad is it?" she asked. Robert's laugh was bitter. "Bad enough that your mother thinks we should sell the house. Bad enough that I'm starting to think she's right." The words hit Angeline like a physical blow. The house wasn't just their home. It was 3 generations of Parker family history, the foundation of everything stable in their lives. If they lost it, her parents would have to start over in their 60s, with nothing to show for a lifetime of careful, practical choices. "Dad, Don't." Robert's voice was sharp. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't offer to help with money you don't have. And don't tell me this is temporary, because I've been telling myself that lie for 2 years." They sat in silence, surrounded by the accumulated inventory of a failing business, spark plugs and oil filters that represented hope purchased but never realized. Through the front window, Angeline could see the empty storefront where Martinez Electronics used to be, another casualty of Amazon and online competition. "I've been thinking about your startup," Robert said finally, "about why it makes me so angry." Angeline looked up, surprised by the admission. "It's not because I think you'll fail. It's because I'm afraid you'll succeed, and it'll prove that everything I believed about security and stability was wrong." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Angeline reached across the desk, covering his weathered hand with her own. "Your way wasn't wrong, Dad. It just..." The world changed faster than anyone expected. That evening, the family gathered in the kitchen for what Linda euphemistically called a financial planning discussion. But the careful euphemisms couldn't disguise the reality. They were facing the possible loss of everything Robert had spent his life building. Jessica participated via video call from her Chicago office, where she was working late again to avoid going home to Brad, and another evening of stilted conversation about children they weren't having and dreams they'd stopped discussing. "I can contribute $15,000 from my savings," Jessica offered. "It's not much, but..." "It's generous," Linda said quickly. "But $15,000 won't solve the underlying problem." Tyler, who'd been quietly observing the family dynamics, spoke up for the first time. "What if we approached this differently? What if instead of just keeping the auto parts store alive, we helped it evolve? Robert's expression was skeptical. Evolve how? Finance Flow isn't just an app, Tyler explained. It's a platform for helping small businesses understand their finances. What if we piloted a B2B version right here? Help other struggling local businesses optimize their cash flow, plan for seasonal variations, make data-driven decisions about inventory and expansion? Angeline felt something click into place. The algorithm could analyze purchasing patterns, predict demand cycles, optimize ordering to reduce carrying costs. English, please, Robert said. But his tone had shifted from resignation to cautious interest. We turn your business knowledge into software, Angeline translated. 30 years of understanding how small businesses really work, combined with AI that can spot patterns humans miss. We could help every auto parts store in Ohio, hell, every small business in the Midwest, make smarter financial decisions. Linda, who'd been silent through most of the discussion, cleared her throat. I've been tracking Finance Flow's metrics, she said quietly. The admission surprised everyone. Linda had always claimed technology was beyond her, that numbers belonged to accountants and engineers. I understand the consumer model, she continued, her voice gaining confidence. But Tyler's right. The real opportunity might be B2B. Small business owners don't have time to learn complex financial software. They need something that understands their world. Jessica leaned forward on the laptop screen. From a legal perspective, B2B has advantages. Fewer regulatory complications, higher revenue per customer, stickier user retention. You've been researching this, Angeline realized. I've been researching a lot of things lately, Jessica replied, including whether I'm brave enough to change my own life. The conversation that followed was the most honest the Parker family had shared in years. Robert admitted his fear that his life's work was becoming obsolete. Linda revealed her secret pride in Angeline's courage to risk everything for something she believed in. Jessica confessed her growing unhappiness with corporate law and her marriage to a man who loved her but didn't understand her. I want to help, Jessica said finally. Not just with money. I want to join Finance Flow as your legal counsel. Help build something that matters instead of just protecting things that already exist. Angeline stared at her sister's image on the laptop screen, seeing someone she'd never fully recognized before. Not the perfect older sister who'd always had the right answers, but a woman brave enough to admit she'd been asking the wrong questions. What about Brad? Linda asked gently. What about your partnership track? Jessica's smile was sad but determined. Brad married the person he thought I was, not the person I'm becoming. And partnership at a corporate firm isn't worth sacrificing who I want to be. As the family meeting dissolved into planning sessions and tentative optimism, Angeline realized something had fundamentally shifted. They weren't just talking about saving Robert's business or growing her startup. They were talking about rebuilding their family around shared purpose instead of shared obligation. The reckoning Michael Thompson had demanded was happening, but not in the way any of them had expected. Sometimes the most important questions weren't about business strategy or market opportunity. Sometimes they were about whether you had the courage to let the people you love see who you really were, and whether they'd love you anyway. Outside, the Ohio nights settled over their small town with its familiar quietude. But inside the Parker house, something new was beginning. Fragile as a startup, uncertain as any beginning, but real enough to build a future on. Michael Thompson's second visit to Ohio came 3 weeks after the family reckoning, and Angeline barely recognized the woman who greeted him at the door. Gone was the desperate need to prove herself, replaced by something more sustainable. Quiet confidence rooted in purpose rather than validation. Your metrics are impressive, Thompson said, reviewing their updated pitch in the Parker family kitchen. Consumer downloads up 400%, beta B2B users showing 93% retention. But what's really changed is your presentation style. Angeline glanced at her family, who'd insisted on being present for this meeting. Robert sat with spreadsheets he'd prepared himself, analyzing local small business financial patterns. Linda had compiled user feedback surveys with the methodical precision of her teaching days. Even Chloe had prepared social media analytics that rivaled professional marketing reports. I stopped trying to build a company that would impress my family, Angeline said. Started building one that could help them instead. Thompson's smile was approving. That's the leadership maturity I was looking for. Midwest Ventures is prepared to offer $2 million in Series A funding. The kitchen erupted in celebration, but Angeline noticed Jessica's absence from the family video call. When she tried calling later, Brad answered with the strained politeness that had become their new normal. She's at the office again, he said. Been working until midnight most nights. I think she's avoiding something, but she won't talk to me about it. 2 days later, Jessica's resignation letter from her law firm made front page of the Chicago Tribune's business section. Rising star attorney leaves partnership track for family startup, read the headline, accompanied by a photo that captured Jessica looking more alive than Angeline had seen her in years. I couldn't do it anymore, Jessica explained during their emergency family call. Billable hours defending corporations that don't need defending, while you're building something that actually helps people. I want to be part of that. Brad's confusion was painful to watch through the video call. But the partnership, the house, we had plans. You had plans, Jessica replied, her voice gentle but firm. I had obligations. There's a difference. The conversation that followed revealed the fault lines that had been growing in Jessica's marriage for years. Brad couldn't understand why she'd sacrificed security for uncertainty, stability for purpose. They were the same arguments Robert had made months earlier, but coming from someone who claimed to love Jessica, they sounded different, smaller, more fearful. I need some time to think, Brad said finally, and the call ended with an uncomfortable silence that spoke volumes about the price of following your dreams. That weekend, Jessica arrived in Ohio with 3 suitcases and a determination that reminded Angeline of her own leap from Microsoft. They worked side by side, setting up Finance Flow's legal structure, incorporating both consumer and B2B divisions, preparing for the complexity that came with real funding and real expectations. TechCrunch wants to interview us, Tyler announced, holding up his phone. And 3 other VCs have reached out since Thompson's investment went public. Angeline found herself studying her reflection in her childhood bedroom mirror, seeing someone she was still learning to recognize. Success was arriving faster than she'd dared hope, but it felt different than her fantasies. Less about vindication, more about responsibility. The TechCrunch article ran the following Tuesday. Ohio startup proves fintech innovation doesn't require Silicon Valley address. The writer had captured something essential about Finance Flow, how their Midwest sensibilities had created technology that spoke to overlooked markets. User growth is accelerating, Chloe reported during their morning stand-up meeting, which now took place around the kitchen table where she'd first defended Angeline's vision. We're at 120,000 active users, and the B2B pilot is booked solid through next quarter. Robert, who'd become an unofficial advisor to their small business clients, looked up from his own laptop. Martinez Auto Repair increased their quarterly profit by 18% using our cash flow optimization. Tommy's talking about expanding to a second location. Linda smiled from her position at the stove, where she was preparing lunch for what had become an impromptu office staff. It's nice to see the store busy again, even if it's with your meetings instead of auto parts. That evening, as Angeline walked through her childhood neighborhood, she realized something fundamental had shifted. The houses looked the same, the streets followed familiar patterns, but her relationship to this place had transformed. She was no longer the girl who'd felt trapped by small-town expectations. She was the woman who'd found a way to honor those values while building something unprecedented. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael Thompson. CNN wants to feature Finance Flow in their American Innovation Series. You interested in national television? 6 months ago, the opportunity would have felt like validation. Tonight, it felt like responsibility, a chance to tell the story of what happened when family support replaced family pressure, when building something together mattered more than proving someone wrong. She looked up at her parents' house, light spilling from windows that now housed her dreams as well as her memories, and realized she was finally ready for whatever came next. The Finance Flow office occupied 3 floors of a renovated brick building in downtown Toledo, far enough from Silicon Valley to maintain their Midwest identity but professional enough to impress institutional investors. Angeline stood at her corner office window, watching Tyler conduct interviews with candidates who looked impossibly young and impossibly confident. "The VP of Engineering from Chicago is here," Jessica announced, appearing in the doorway with the efficient authority she'd brought to her role as Chief Legal Officer. "She's impressive on paper, but she keeps asking about our Scala planning to colonize Mars." Angeline turned from the window, studying her sister's transformation. Jessica had traded her corporate suits for jeans and blazers, her rigid schedule for the chaotic demands of startup life. The change suited her in ways that surprised them both. "Maybe she's exactly what we need," Angeline said. "Someone who thinks bigger than we do." The interview with Sarah Chen went better than expected. Chen had built engineering teams at 3 successful startups, and her questions about infrastructure and growth planning exposed gaps in Finance Flow's technical architecture that Angeline had been hoping to ignore. "Your consumer platform is solid," Chen said, reviewing their codebase on Angeline's laptop. "But the B2B system is held together with digital duct tape. You need to rebuild from the ground up if you want to handle enterprise-level clients." Tyler, who'd been taking notes throughout the interview, looked up with concern. "How long would that take?" "6 months, minimum. Probably 8 if you want to do it right." After Chen left, the core team gathered in their makeshift conference room, a space that still smelled faintly of the bakery that had previously occupied the building. The decision to hire experienced executives felt like crossing a threshold they couldn't uncross. "She's right about the technical infrastructure," Angeline admitted, "but hiring someone that senior changes everything. Chain of command, decision-making authority, company culture." Robert, who'd been quietly listening from his usual corner, spoke up. "Sounds like growing pains. Same thing happened when I hired my first full-time mechanic. Suddenly, I wasn't just running a business. I was managing people who knew things I didn't." Chloe looked up from her laptop, where she was monitoring social media engagement in real time. "Speaking of growing pains, we've got a problem. TechCrunch is running a follow-up story about our rapid expansion, and the comments section is brutal. Lots of people saying we're moving too fast, abandoning our small-town values for Silicon Valley hype." She turned her screen around, revealing a thread of criticism that stung more than Angeline expected. "Sellouts," read one comment. "Another startup that forgot where it came from," said another. "They're not entirely wrong," Linda said from her position at the conference table, where she'd been reviewing financial projections with the methodical precision she brought to everything. "We're hiring executives who've never lived outside major metropolitan areas, taking investment from firms that specialize in rapid growth and early exits. At what point do we stop being a family business and start being just another tech company?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. They'd been so focused on success that they hadn't considered whether success might change them in ways they didn't want to change. That afternoon, Angeline found herself walking through the old auto parts store, which they'd converted into a community workspace for local small businesses. The space hummed with quiet productivity. Restaurant owners optimizing their supply chains, contractors analyzing seasonal cash flow patterns, retail managers using Finance Flow's B2B tools to make data-driven inventory decisions. "This is what we're really building," she realized, watching Robert explain profit margin optimization to a bakery owner who'd been struggling with rising ingredient costs. "Not just an app, but a way for people to take control of their financial futures." The revelation crystallized during their evening team meeting. Instead of hiring Sarah Chen as VP of Engineering, they offered her a consulting contract to rebuild their technical infrastructure while training Angeline and her existing team. Instead of pursuing aggressive expansion, they committed to sustainable growth that honored their mission rather than just maximizing valuation. "We're going to disappoint some investors," Tyler warned, "the ones who want hockey stick growth and quick exits." "Then they're not our investors," Angeline replied. "We're building this for the long term." Jessica, who'd been fielding calls from corporate law firms offering partnership-level positions, nodded her agreement. "I didn't leave Chicago to recreate Chicago in Ohio." I left to help build something that reflects our values, not just our ambitions. The decision to prioritize sustainability over speed had immediate consequences. 2 potential investors withdrew their interest, citing concerns about finance flow's, quote, conservative growth strategy. A reporter from Forbes canceled an interview after learning they weren't planning rapid national expansion. But the backlash revealed something important about their identity. They weren't building finance flow to prove they could succeed in Silicon Valley's game. They were building it to change the rules of that game, to demonstrate that technology companies could prioritize purpose alongside profit. "We're at a crossroads," Michael Thompson observed during his monthly check-in call. "You can continue growing organically and risk being overtaken by competitors with more aggressive strategies. Or you can scale rapidly and risk losing the authenticity that makes finance flow special." Angeline looked around the conference room at her family, her team, her community. "What if there's a third option? What if we grow fast enough to matter, but slowly enough to stay ourselves?" Thompson's laugh carried approval. "That sounds like the hardest path possible." Which probably means it's the right one. Outside their office windows, Toledo's downtown was experiencing its own renaissance. Small businesses thriving with the help of better financial tools. Young professionals choosing to stay in Ohio instead of fleeing to coastal cities. A community rediscovering its potential. Finance flow was growing, but so was everything around it. And maybe that was the point. The notification arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. Alert. Competitor launch, FinFlow Pro by Goldman Sachs. Angeline stared at her phone screen, her morning coffee growing cold as she absorbed the implications. Goldman Sachs, with their billion-dollar marketing budget and decades of financial expertise, had launched a direct competitor to finance flow. Tyler's call came 30 seconds later, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Have you seen the TechCrunch headline? Wall Street giant enters micro-investing space with FinFlow Pro." By 8 a.m., the entire team had gathered in their conference room, laptops open, faces grim. Chloe was monitoring social media sentiment in real time, watching their mentions shift from excitement to uncertainty, as users discovered they had a new option backed by one of the world's most powerful financial institutions. "They copied our interface," Sarah Chen reported via video call from Chicago, where she was consulting on their infrastructure rebuild. "Not exactly, but close enough to confuse users. And their marketing budget appears to be unlimited. Sponsored posts everywhere, celebrity endorsements, primetime TV commercials." Jessica paced behind the conference table, her legal mind analyzing attack vectors. "The good news is they haven't violated any patents or copyrights. The bad news is they don't need to. They have enough resources to simply overwhelm us with superior execution." Robert, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, looked up from his laptop. "How much market share can they capture?" "All of it," Tyler said bluntly. "If they execute properly. Free transactions for the first year. Professional financial advisory services. Integration with existing Goldman Sachs investment products. They're not just competing with us. They're making us irrelevant." The room fell silent except for the clicking of keyboards and the distant hum of traffic outside their windows. Angeline felt the familiar weight of family expectations pressing down on her shoulders. But this time it felt different. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about protecting something they'd built together. At 10:15 a.m., the second crisis hit. Chloe's monitoring dashboard lit up with red alerts as users began reporting missing transaction data. The software rebuild they'd been implementing had introduced a critical bug that corrupted historical investment records for nearly 3,000 users. "How bad is it?" Angeline asked, though Sarah Chen's expression already provided the answer. "Bad. The data corruption affects our most active users, people who've been with us since beta testing. Their investment histories, automatic transfers, savings goals, all scrambled." Tyler was already calculating the damage. 3,000 users averaging $250 in managed investments. We're looking at potential liability of $750,000, plus the cost of rebuilding their financial profiles manually. Linda, who'd been monitoring customer service emails, looked up with barely controlled alarm. "The phones are ringing constantly. People are scared. They think we've lost their money." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of crisis management. Angeline and Sarah worked frantically to isolate the corrupted data, while Tyler and Chloe managed customer communications. Jessica fielded calls from Michael Thompson and other investors who'd heard about both the Goldman Sachs launch and their technical problems. By 4 p.m., they'd restored most of the missing data, but the damage to their reputation was spreading across social media faster than they could respond. #FinanceFlowFail was trending on Twitter, with users sharing screenshots of corrupted accounts and expressing doubts about trusting a quote, small-town startup with their financial futures. "We need to make a statement," Tyler said, his usual optimism strained to the breaking point. "Something that addresses both the technical issues and the competitive pressure." Robert, who'd been monitoring local news coverage, suddenly straightened in his chair. "What if we don't compete with Goldman Sachs? What if we partner with them instead?" The suggestion was so unexpected that conversation stopped entirely. Angeline stared at her father, wondering if the stress had finally overwhelmed his practical sensibilities. "Hear me out," Robert continued, his voice gaining confidence. "Goldman Sachs is great at serving wealthy clients, but they don't understand small-town America. They don't know how to talk to people who've never had investment accounts, who think Wall Street is something that happens to other people." Jessica's eyes lit up with understanding. "A white-label partnership. They provide the back-end infrastructure and regulatory compliance. We provide the user experience and market understanding." "Exactly," Robert said. "They get access to markets they've never been able to reach. We get the resources to compete with anyone. And our users get the security of Goldman Sachs backing with the personal touch they expect from us." Chloe looked up from her laptop, where she'd been drafting crisis communication posts. "That's actually brilliant. David and Goliath doesn't win by fighting Goliath. He wins by making Goliath his ally." The partnership proposal that emerged from their crisis meeting was audacious in its simplicity. FinanceFlow would maintain its brand identity and customer relationships, while leveraging Goldman Sachs's infrastructure and regulatory expertise. Users would benefit from institutional-level security and expanded investment options, while Goldman Sachs would gain access to the demographic they'd been trying to reach for decades. "It could work," Michael Thompson said during their emergency investor call, "but you'd be giving up a significant amount of control." Goldman Sachs doesn't typically enter partnerships as silent partners. Angeline looked around the conference room at her family, her team, her community of users who'd trusted them with their financial futures. The decision wasn't just about business strategy. It was about whether they could maintain their values while operating at scale. "What matters most?" she asked. "Maintaining control or maximizing impact?" Linda, who'd been quietly reviewing the financial projections, spoke up. "I've been thinking about Sarah from Portland, our first beta user. She doesn't care whether her investment account is backed by FinanceFlow or Goldman Sachs. She cares about whether she can afford to send her kids to college." The truth of that observation settled over the room like morning light, revealing a landscape that had been obscured by darkness. They weren't just building a company. They were building a bridge between two worlds that had never learned to speak the same language. "Let's call Goldman Sachs," Angeline said. "But we negotiate as equals. They need us as much as we need them." Outside their office windows, Toledo's evening rush hour was beginning. People heading home to families, dreams, financial futures that FinanceFlow had helped make more secure. The crisis wasn't over, but for the first time all day, Angeline felt like they might emerge stronger than they'd entered. The Goldman Sachs partnership transformed FinanceFlow in ways none of them had anticipated. Within 6 months, their user base had grown to 1.2 million active accounts. Their technology infrastructure could handle institutional-level transaction volumes, and their brand had evolved from scrappy startup to trusted financial platform. "We're no longer a family business," Angeline observed during their Monday morning team meeting, looking around a conference room that now accommodated 12 full-time employees. "We're a family-led business. There's a difference." Robert, who now held the official title of Director of Small Business Partnerships, had embraced his role with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found his true calling. His desk was covered with case studies from FinanceFlow B2B clients, restaurants that had optimized their supply chains, retail stores that had improved their inventory management, service businesses that had streamlined their cash flow forecasting. The Martinez family opened their second auto repair location, he announced, unable to hide his pride. They're crediting our financial planning tools with giving them the confidence to expand. Linda had surprised everyone, including herself, by accepting the role of chief financial officer when their previous consultant had taken a position with another startup. Her mathematical background and deep understanding of small-town financial realities had proven invaluable as they navigated the complexities of rapid growth. Our retention rates are remarkable, she reported, reviewing quarterly metrics with the precision that had made her an excellent teacher. 94% of users who complete our onboarding process are still active after 12 months. The national average for fintech apps is 37%.